Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy, and I'm here with Howard Swig and Zach Beatty here at HQ. Fellas, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for pulling me off the bench and bringing me back.
You bet. Zach's here for his second one, and Howard's actually just fresh back from a week-long driving event that we're gonna hear about. He was on the Cal Mille, his personal and family event that has now evolved into a new type of driving event. He's going to give us a little bit of feedback on what that was like, and then we're going to talk about a couple other events that are coming up really soon. We're pumped because events are starting to happen again as we come into summer, and people are driving and doing stuff, which feels great. And then we're going to talk about an interesting topic on BAT, which is tribute cars, clones, and replicas, and all the different stuff that's going on in that space. From brand new Astons coming out of the factory again with new stampings to obviously the big names in that world, things like, Beck 550 Spiders, and, the differing world of what is a real Manx buggy versus the 100 different other types, and everything to Shelby clones and everything that's out there, and the kind of words we use to describe those, and also just some of the kind of cool stuff that's floating around out there. We've seen all sorts of submissions like that, so we can talk about it, and we've owned a few of them even. So first up, Howard, tell us about the California Mille that you were just back from and what it was like.
Yeah, so this was my first event first road rally since 2019. The California Mille. This is an event that my family has started and is still involved with. This was the first year that we've kind of transitioned stewardship to Haggerty, and it was so great. Their whole mission is to save driving, and I joked on the event that the event was really saving driving for me personally. I've been hammering away at BAT for the last 18 months. And it is great to remind myself about the hobby side and why we're all doing this and all the fun, great things you can go out and do in an old car. So this event, for those who might not be familiar with it, is for pre-1957 cars that would have or could have run in the Mille Miglia. It's 1,000 miles over 4 days. This event, the route was in Northern California, so it started in the Bay Area in Sausalito. First night was up in Mendocino at the Little River Inn, which is a great spot in the little beautiful hamlet town of Mendocino that this event's been going to since the first year, 1991. Second night was in Redding. Unfortunately, we couldn't go over Highway 36 because of some road construction, but we went over 299 for the California listeners who actually know what these roads are, some of the really great driving roads in the far north of the state. And from Redding, we headed south to Yountville with a stop at Thunderhill Raceway, where some of the cars got to turn some laps, which was quite a sight to see these cars circulating around. But no, the event was awesome. About 50 cars. I was driving a little Giulietta Spider Veloce Alpha. This year, we definitely had a oversubscription, I would call it, of Porsche 356s, 18 of those in a field of 50. But it was still great to see everything under the sun, speedsters, coupes, four cams. So it was really a who's who of the 356A Porsche world, both cars and people.
So not to put you on the spot, but what was your favorite car in the event?
So there were some really awesome cars. I can run through some of those. There were two Lancia D24s, which is pretty remarkable because I believe there's only 6 in the entire world that exist. So it's pretty special to see one of those out in the wild, not to mention 2.
That was 40% of the market on those cruising around on the event for the weekend is pretty strong.
Yep, and those guys were driving hard and definitely enjoying those. What else? We had 2 really special Maseratis, both A6G models, a Zagato-bodied car, and the A6G 2000. That was, some of you may remember, the French Bayon collection that sold a number of great 50 sports cars. This was in that collection. This gentleman purchased it out of Europe and has done our event now a few times. A guy from LA brought his long wheelbase Cal Spider, which was pretty neat. I mentioned the Porsches. This event is typically, the popular cars are 356s, Alphas, 300 SL Mercedes, DB2 Aston Martin. So kind of a smattering of all the kind of stuff you would expect to see, but It was really great. People really prepared their cars well. I think we had 2 or 3 cars that dropped out on the first day, but pretty remarkable reliability the rest of the event. So I think 40 or 50 cars started and 45 or 46 finished. So I think most drivers and organizers would take that finish ratio any day of the week.
And what was the oldest car on the event? Do you recall?
Good question, Zach. Typically, there is a meaningful amount of pre-war cars. This year, not so much. There were, I think, only 2 pre-war entries. A guy in his SS100 Jag, and a guy who was a real sadomasochist in a pre-war Bentley with kind of a cool kind of speed Brooklyn's body on it.
He's a regular attender, right?
He is, yeah.
1,000 miles a weekend of that car is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, a guy named Doug Whiteman, if he's listening, big props to you. You're my hero, and your wife is super cool to go along with you in that. We actually ran with him on a number of days, and man, I felt in our little Alpha we were going at a pretty good clip, and I'm looking at the rearview mirror, and Doug's back there. We live in that Bentley and not losing much ground. So. Definitely great to be back. I feel like events are back. Certainly, having just done this one, I'm all fired up. And Randy and Zach. Now that I've given my expose on the Mille, I think you guys were chatting today about events on your calendar coming up.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not going to let you off the hook, though. We're going to talk more Mille. You can't just drop all those names and cars and then be like, yeah, we're done. It's like super all-star team, and I love talking about that event and you doing it and being part of it and its future, frankly. We are going to seek out a couple things. And honestly, I just had a funny conversation with my wife just today talking about like getting back into events like this. I haven't done a car event in a long time because of COVID. And so like there used to be this drumbeat come holiday time. It's like, okay, start getting your car ready because the snowball rally's coming and then the summer rallies are coming and then things are happening. And we've been in this weird limbo of the cars not needing to be ready for anything. It's cool to have them out and cool to take them up for a ham sandwich up the road or whatever. But the 2 and 3 day events that were such a part of my life for a long run there pre-COVID, those would get you kind of sort of primed for the year. It was a major milestone. You had to be ready. Like if you signed up and then your car wasn't ready, like you kind of blew it. So I feel like that kept me in the garage, kept me turning wrenches, kept me coordinating schedules with other staffers here at BAT that were also running stuff.
Do you remember the first event you did, what year it was and which one it was?
I did. The first real organized one was called the California Mille, which is like the super low buck scrub, fun dirt road version of the California Mille. It's almost done in sort of a hat tip to the California Mille, but with people with $200 in their pocket.
It's the In-N-Out burger of the California Mille, right?
Pretty much. There were if they're the filet mignon, yeah, totally. Like it's scruffier cars and lower barrier to entry. And interesting you say this with all the 356s on that one. My buddy Pete Stout and I took my kind of rough 356 on that in 2006. I just had a clutch put in it by High Tech up in San Rafael, and it was running great.
That was the Silver
356A, and it was so perfect in my mind for that sort of an event. But it was not so clean that I wouldn't drive it on dirt roads and really get after it, right? And we took it up to Napa for the Parkville. Not the Parkville grade. What's the grade? Oakville grade. The Oakville grade over there. And we were turning around to help somebody or do something, and I pulled into some deep, like off-camber weird driveway and almost tore the muffler off the car at like day 1, mile like 42 of a 3-day event. And on a 356, as you know, that pulls the muffler off of the exhaust ports. And so I had an exhaust leak that we nursed for the rest of the way. The car was so perfect in terms of how it was running right out of the shop. And then I goofed up and did that. And so we had to sort of hack that thing back together and run it for the rest of the event. And we did, but we were underneath it in a parking lot that evening and doing stuff. My buddy Pete was a very good sport to go in sort of a door slammer 356. Very different than the cars on Howard's event.
And that's part of the best part about the event, though, the parking lot scene. You're not the only one under your car, and people are feeding you Pacificos while you're down under there.
Totally. I mean, our flavor of events are sometimes like that. I know, even though that's true. I mean, Howard's event, right? I mean, there were people wrenching on cars in parking lot. I saw the first day, there was some super cool social media stuff that both Haggerty was doing really well and other just attendees were doing in cool ways. I was really wishing I was on the Cal Mille with Howard just because it was done so well. And there was some guy with his XK Jag with like all the wheels off of it in this swanky hotel parking lot, and I was like, "What is this guy doing?" I guess he was replacing brake cylinders or something. I don't know what he was doing, but that happens to the cheap cars. That happens to the expensive cars, right?
Absolutely, and of note, actually, two entries that were bought on Bring a Trailer on the event. Talking about across the price spectrum. One was the 300 SL Gullwing that we sold to launch our premium auctions back in May 2019. The gentleman that bought that car on BAT, who reminded me that he was actually bidding from the beach in Normandy in France at the time and was just hoping for a good enough internet connection to get his bid in. He prepared that car for the event and drove it all 1,000 miles. And it was awesome to see that car go from here in the BAT office to doing a major event. So that was great to hang with him. And on the other end of the spectrum, a guy who bought an 57 MGA, the only MGA on the event. He was rocking the white walls, which I appreciated. Another cool young guy from SF. So it was nice to see some of the BAT alumni taking the Italian flag at the start. Not the green flag.
I think we need to, on the podcast, get the owner of the 300 SL that he bought on BAT on here. His name is also Howard, interestingly, but the story of the buy of that car is totally crazy. He was in Europe on the D-Day anniversary. It was 75 years since D-Day, and he was there with his wife, like celebrating that, and he's walking around over there buying a German car while they're having this like Allied celebration of World War II. He said there were super weird vibes about the whole thing, but he was stoked on the car and wants to take it to Europe, and said when he was buying it, one of the reasons he was buying it is he wanted to do the California Mille, and now he just lived that dream, and he's also run the 300 SL Rally. Anyway, I'm not going to steal all the thunder of that story, but he is a very interesting fellow, and still holds the record, right? It has the cat walking across the keyboard winning bid, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 was the winning bid on that car. And when he wrote the check for it, he added 89 cents. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 89 cents. Interesting BAT buyer for sure. Anyway, we'll get the whole story another time. But yeah, cool that he was on there. MGA, wow, that is the other end of the spectrum. And awesome that cars like that can be on the event since they're the right year, right?
And you sold him a great car. He completed the entire event without issue. He wanted me to tell you, Randy, that he did some minor cosmetic work. I think he put in a 123 distributor, which I think he was chatting with you about, and some other, drivability and reliability upgrades or changes. But no, he's thrilled, and I think he's planning to do many more 1,000-mile drives in that thing, and it's certainly up to the challenge.
Yeah, he said he may put AC in it. Take the Sawzall to that baby and put AC in it. I wonder if he did it. Who knows? And honestly, if you're going to do more driving, hat tip to that dude for having that car out there, putting miles on it. It's a fun car.
So Howard, how are you feeling after 1,000 miles in the Giulietta?
I was feeling good. I was probably feeling more relaxed than the gentleman who brought maybe one of my favorite cars, which was a Lamar Works 54 or 55 Triumph TR2. I think this thing finished like 14th overall at the 55 Lamar race. So not too often you get a really legit history car like that. And driving a TR2 on any rally of any distance is an accomplishment, much less this event. So that was neat to see.
Yeah, and we should also mention, like, events like that, be they the Cal Mille or other ones, for me it was always crazy, right? Like, there's the barrier to entry. Like, I never thought I was going to be able to pay the entry fee, but I've always been sort of hanger on and go to the beginning. They're very warm. You can see the cars at the start. You can see the cars sometimes along the route if you can suss that out. And now social media really lets you follow and be sort of a fan of what's going on. And typically the owners are pretty cool if you're cautious about how you approach and are respectful and thoughtful. I mean, you can see a Tour de France Ferrari 250 that that's just like an unbelievable piece of history that is just parked there at a nice hotel in the area.
Parked next to a Honda Odyssey.
Totally. I mean, brave. That is bravery. So I kind of grew up going to Howard's event well before I knew him, just going to the start and the cool fanfare that they put on in San Francisco. It was like on the calendar every year for my dad and I to go check out all these cars. And now I get to know Howard and hear his story. I've always just been so stoked to have him on our team, just because, I mean, the history he has with that event and hands-on experience is incredible. So anyway, cool stuff with the Cal Mille. Really glad they're doing it. Really glad Haggerty has gotten involved and is going to carry that torch forward. I think everybody's super happy for that and how that event went off. So hat tip to those guys, and looking forward to seeing that coming back, sort of San Francisco institution next year.
Absolutely. And I will say one thing that I do really like about some of the other maybe less fancy events that Randy mentioned is those allow drivers to go oftentimes on kind of a different types of routes and roads in an event like the Mille. You can't really, in good conscience, take a lot of these cars down these super crazy cowpath, middle of nowhere roads for a number of reasons. But on, some of the more local events we do, and for you guys listening in whatever state you might be in, one of the reasons we love the stuff we do, Motherlode 500 or the Fault Line, is the organizers do a really brilliant job of getting out the benchmark map or sitting down with the proper map material to really map out a route that you would probably not know or do if you were just going on a weekend or Sunday drive on your own. We love the Motherlode because the organizer, Josh, takes us into the foothills in Yosemite and across the mountains on these tiny little, Forest Service roads. Kind of many cases, not even secondary B roads, but like really roads you wonder why they even were built, because they're not even connecting two towns.
Pretty incredible, just so one guy can get his mail, the infrastructure surrounding all of that.
So yeah, you definitely got to have two hands on the wheel, be paying attention. But I love getting out into beyond the middle of nowhere and exploring what what the state has to offer, and those are the types of events where you really get out there.
Man, you're firing me up right now. Like on today's decision day, I got to figure out, send in my application here and make things happen. But it's good to have those milestones on the summer and spring calendar again. And I kind of want to get back into that. Hearing your story of the event last week, I really, no joke, was sitting at home being like, I'm missing out. I need to be out there. So, so I've got a car I'm excited to bring. Zach's got a car he can bring on out. Some exciting new stuff, new challenges, and frankly, I want to do more of these and support these. I started branching out. That's one thing that happened before COVID is I kind of gave myself a little bit of a, hey, try new events thing. I told you about 06 at the California Mille, and I think I've run, I'm not nearly the most sort of veteran person there, but I think I've run 5 of those or 6 of those, something like that. And a bunch of the other events in the area. And, but I, said it'd be cool to do something in other regions. So we always love to hear from the audience about other events. Whenever I hear of another event popping up in the Rocky Mountains or in the Southeast or in the Northeast or wherever, I'd love to hear about it and learn about it and frankly go do it and try it out. And we have others on staff here that love to do that stuff too. So we have BAT shipping and want to ship the cars to wherever and go put the pedal down and go try this stuff out and meet new people. So, and I think there'll be many, many more of them in the future. Howard and I always look at each other as taking this as a little bit of a barometer of the health of why people are buying cars. What are they going to do with these cars? And Howard is always very quick to dive in and be like, things are oversubscribed, right? Like people want to get out, even forget COVID factors. Like people want to go see new things, have new experiences, and that's always the favorite thing that drives BAT buying patterns for me, right? Like I get it. A lot of people do, investing or nostalgic buys or whatever. But the people that are like, I'm buying it because I'm going to go drive to XYZ or I'm going to go drive on XYZ event or race it or whatever. That stuff fires me up so much, and I know it does you guys as well. So yeah, so we talked about a couple of the other events that are happening around here. There's one called, the Motherlode. There's one called the Fault Line that happens down in Central California. And I know there's a couple out in the Midwest that are sort of burgeoning and have some new following. Anyhow, tons of other stuff. What other things are cooking this summer, Zach? I know you're thinking of those two. Are there any others that are?
Those are my two big ones on the agenda. I finally have a car of my own that's ready for it. That's been a little bit of a work in process for a couple of years, and now I have what could be described as a cheater motor for an event like that. So
that's what you need, though. You need the cheater motor.
Oh man, that's what I need to keep up with you. Total psychopath out there. It's still like one of the craziest drives of my life is being behind you and your 56 Giulietta TI with your roof light. Oh man, what tires do you have on that?
We have a TI on the site right now. Did you guys saw that?
Yeah,
great. There's a TI in Rogue, dude. It's a second gen like mine. Mine's actually a little later than that. That's a 60, I think. Mine is 61.
Okay.
But it's but driving that thing is fun. I ran with the Swade brothers when you guys were driving your silver GTV. I remember driving through some back roads with you guys in that car.
We had the whole BAT staff trying to keep Randy in sight, going through the corners on his Vredestein 155 tires.
That's right, skinnies.
You put on a clinic that morning on Mines Road, if I'm not mistaken, here in the East Bay. So
Mines Road, was fun. Livermore, California. That's for sure. That's an interesting one and a good example of the kind of crazy roads that those events run on. For those of you who know that, anytime you're out in the Bay Area, you gotta look for that road. Anyhow, event stuff, super cool. Thanks for the recap, Howard. I could talk Cal Mille and all those individual cars for a really long time here, and maybe we can do that on another episode. The only Lancia D24 I have ever seen in person was on the lawn at Pebble Beach, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I'm still not clear if it was one of those two that you had or one of cars 3 through 6 that you guys are referencing. But man, those things are really, really special. And a long way from a Fulvia or a Lancia Delta, just kind of the total opposite end of the Lancia spectrum. So cool. Well, let's get away from events a little bit. One other thing we definitely wanted to touch on and talk about, it's been a big topic around here lately, and a lot of cars going through the site, is tributes and replicas and kit cars and heavily modified cars of one make made to look like another car of that make, like some Ferraris do that, rebodies, these sorts of different things. I came up with, in the early days of BAT, like a matrix of what are we going to call these things, right? Like, do you call it people would show up with the exact same car, and one guy would call it a Shelby replica, and one guy would call it a Shelby tribute, and then Cobra kits and all this sort of stuff. But I think it's an interesting world. Sometimes, you put your nose up at that and say, I'd never drive a car that's not real or that's been messed with that much. But I'm the first to say that I drove 2 Shelby replica cars, Shelby clones to high school. That's what I drove, was fastbacks with stripes on them, and I thought they were the best thing ever. I know Howard owns one of those right now, and a few other folks on staff have some interesting cars like that. So what do you guys think of that whole universe? And when I say that, even, what are the first cars that jump to mind?
It's a fascinating discussion, and one that is deserving of a probably more in-depth conversation that we'll give it, and I'm sure we'll revisit this topic in more podcasts in the future. My mind goes to 2 things on both ends of the spectrum. One is kind of maybe what gives replicas a bad rap, like Pontiac Fiero-based 250 GTOs and Excaliburs and stuff that maybe is not so wonderful, but I also, the other part of me goes to, replicas of the really great thoroughbreds. And that's a topic that I am a huge proponent of, really well done clones, replicas, whatever you want to call them. If you are someone who, loves those cars and they are so incredibly rare and valuable today, I think it makes a lot of sense to buy or build a replica of what you love, because it's quite unlikely you will ever own the real thing. And if you can, get 90% of the visual and driving experience for 1% of the price, I think that's a pretty worthwhile trade. Things that stand out to me, stuff like Lynx, Jag XKSSs, a number of which we've sold on BAT, something like a Crossweight and Gardner Type 35 Bugatti. These are all really, people use tool room copy We could probably have a whole separate podcast dedicated to what that exactly means. But I'm a big fan of all that stuff. And Randy was talking about guys that want to get out and drive their car. If you're someone who wants to drive a 250 TR or a Maserati 450S or whatever it might be, and you want to go race it at Goodwood or somewhere else. For most folks, it makes a lot of sense to race, something that is not 100% the real thing. And frankly, in today's world, I don't know how many guys want to go take their 250 TR out onto the track, and from kind of an entertainment and racing exhibition stance. The things are indistinguishable most of the time, and dropping the green flag on a field of amazing cars, if some of them are not exactly the real deal, and they're not being purported to be that, I'm totally okay with that, and I think it actually adds a lot to the hobby.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree. And there's always, I don't know, growing up, the Monterey historic races, there was this it has to be the real car to be there. But then you'd hear all these rumblings of, is it the real car that crossed the finish line, or is it a rebody, or is it whatever? And I'm too distant from the insider circle to know the real ins and outs of how that works. But all I know is, I like that they keep a bar and a standard, and have a lot of the real stuff there. And also, if there's 0 cars that remain anymore of a particular model or of a race winner, it's probably better to have a replica that everybody knows is a replica than have nothing, for sure. I was just watching some coverage of a UK race this weekend called the Amon Cup, right? Named after Chris Amon. It's all GT40s, right? Because he was a big GT40 work driver. I think it was a Donington or something. This is what I waste my time on social media, right? It's
not a waste of time.
Is amazing. And I was at Goodwood as well at the revival for the GT40 race. And so there's 52 GT40s out on track, right? And I don't think that they're all real. They kind of claim that they're all real. They kind of don't claim that they're all real. There's certainly the spec is the right kind, right? There's not bad ones, but there's some sliding scale of what is real and what is not. And I think that world is interesting, and you have to wade into it carefully, especially if you're sliding your credit card and buying one of those cars at auction or whatever. Obviously, you sort it out and get serious expertise there. But I think there's some, just the look of that race and the galleries they have of that. The car with the French flag down the spine, it's just unbelievable. Those guys running those, and the Tourado and that sort of thing. There's a lot of interesting cars there, and how they verify the authenticity is its whole other science. But so that's sort of the heavy end and the motorsport end. But there's also people driving around in different sorts of clones and tributes. I always called a tribute car one that was aimed at a particular VIN number, right? If I had made my Shelby clone in high school look like the Pedro Rodriguez, one red stripe, one green stripe R model, you're going after one exact car that's your dream, or you're going after the Dan Gurney NASCAR and you tribute to him and that car, right? But a clone, I would say, was my cars, which were a 65 fastback with stripes and scoops and torque thrust, and it's kind of that whole genre. So you kind of get into this language of what are these? What the heck is a tribute? What is a replica? What is a clone? Some people really use them interchangeably, but I try to be a little more intentional about that. What do you think about how to describe those?
You've always instilled strong opinions in us about clone, tribute, and replica, and our language on the site reflects that pretty heavily. So I'm in full agreement. I think the way you distinguish each 3 categories is pretty excellent and spot on.
But at the same time, it's hard to always manage that, right? Who knows, right? I'm sure somebody has built a tribute, call it, to that TR2 you're just talking about, right? If they got a green TR2 and they paid 58 on the side, and honestly, amazingly, those early cars, that's almost all the race prep that was done to those, other than maybe some sticky rubber, right? There wasn't a ton of works tricks, maybe a 1/4 inch larger SU carburetor, right? It's just unbelievable how similar some of those early cars were to series cars. As you get later, obviously, if you're building a replica to a 962 Porsche or something, it's a massive undertaking and not similar to any road car you'd ever talk about. But anyway, so there's all of that. But to Howard's earlier point of you're never going to get the real, so what's the replica like? Some of my favorite cars are, 550 Spiders. Seeing the real 550 Spiders go through the big auctions and be on track. The blue one that races at Monterey, sometimes all of them are silver, right? So the guy with the French blue one, it's just like ridiculously wonderful. That, I mean, I'm never gonna get it. You just got to realize you're never gonna get it. And so would doing the right kind of Beck maybe, or a 550 clone with an aluminum body with the proper 356 wheels instead of the bug hubcaps that like the rougher ones come with.
Well, that's a good point. How do you feel about glass body versus
totally
alloy body?
Yeah, you get into that, right? It's like, and honestly, it's price point. Like, am I going to be bummed out that some guy's ripping around in one with a fiberglass body and the wrong offset wheels and
the Subaru motor
and the Subaru motor and the like wrong steering wheel and all this stuff that obviously you can pick out that it's not an authentic car and not really even a very close replica, but that person's stoked on it and they got it for $19,500 and so they're out driving. At some point, you give that person a high five, and you're stoked on it, right? Would it be the car that I buy? No, but you want to encourage people to be kind of pumped. Maybe that guy's saving up to get the right wheels on.
Yeah, I have a hard time reconciling that myself because one of the cooler replicas I think we've had was, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago. We had a Beck 904 replica, which we've only had a couple, and it had a Porsche 3.2 in it, which is a pretty strong setup in that thing, and it would sound ridiculous, but in no way a clone or a tribute, and in the loosest sense, really a replica.
I think those are cool, though. I mean, somebody was making kits, and sometimes it looks like more like a 240Z than it does a 904.
Covered in lights.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, well, I don't know. Or it looks like a VW Puma or whatever. You guys know what those are. We see those submitted. But
Brazilian VWs. We're gonna have a next pod about that. That 550 that you mentioned, I know exactly the car you're talking about. I think that's an ex Jean Behra car, and I went immediately to like replicas of $10 million plus cars. But really, the more relevant discussion is all this other stuff. And I mean, if you're a guy who loves fastback Mustangs or Stepnose, GTVs. Obviously, you love GT350s and Shelbys and GTAs. And if you're a guy who loves, 70s 911s, obviously you love, STRs and all the amazing factory limited production stuff. So doesn't it make a lot of sense that, if you're not, hell bent on 100% stock unmodified, that you would, make an effort to prepare your car in the style of the very best, version of that car that everyone has always lusted after. I'm all for it, and there's somewhere in between clone and tribute that's chalked up, kind of tastefully modified, and obviously inspired by the best stuff. But all the Randy's buddies and a lot of me and Zach's like have these cars they've prepared that are so sweet, and I'm one that you walk up to a car that's done up, in such a way, and most of the time I would probably take that over the maybe more frumpier GTV on Steely's with hubcaps. I'm describing the GTV I have, the more I personally age into the market, the more accepting I am of that stuff, and the more I like it.
I love it, Howard. You brought up one of my favorite terms, tastefully modified, which I don't think any owner is able to apply to their own car. It has to be someone else commenting on your car to call it tastefully modified.
We get plenty of people submitting their car claiming it's tastefully modified, right?
And a lot of this is like the parts discussion. People want to make their cars look a certain way, and you need the right parts. And whether you're talking about real $7 Fuchs, or whether you're talking about 24-inch radiator or R model radiator for a 65, 66 fastback, it ain't so easy to just snap your fingers and build your dream car, even if it's not the real thing. You still need, in many cases, real parts. And yet, that's a whole other part of this discussion is the composition of the car and what's original and what's not. In many cases, the car isn't quote unquote the real thing, but it sure as hell has a lot of real rare parts on it.
Well, that segues pretty nicely to something Randy was talking about right before we started recording. How do you guys feel about Aston doing repop DB5s from the factory, basically as correct as possible, and then also reissuing parts for DB5 owners along with that?
So they've done a couple, right? I think they're doing like a DB4 GT, and they're going to do like a dozen of them or whatever, and then they're doing a Bond car, right? So they're going to like capitalize on the Daniel Craig resurgence of the original Connery silver Bond car. So those are fresh, brand new, every part brand new. Roll it out and put their seal of approval on it. I don't know if it's actually out of an Aston factory or they're contracting like a specialist to help them build it. I don't really know, but those are interesting. And now you're starting to see them in the secondhand market. I think a couple of those Astons have now gone through auctions and stuff. I mean, hey, everybody gets their own thing that they get to chase after. And again, if somebody gets that at half the price of the real one and that makes it happen for them, cool. I'm just in a different state of mind to try to think about like a real car is $4 million. So all of a sudden a car for $1.5 million is a deal or something. That's not the universe that I'm thinking about, but I'm sure that's how, that goes into the math for some folks, and some folks want a really limited run, and there's something appealing about brand new as opposed to, the car that's been rolled 11 times that you're paying millions of dollars for and has a rebody on it anyway, right? So yeah, I think those are interesting. What did Jag do some? I forget if Jag did a XKSS or if they were going to do a D or they were going to do something.
I think they started to. Eagle started their E-Type resto mod, and they got wind of that, and
there's those
do it in house.
Yeah, there's some Jag restoration in house. I know they do that, and I love it when manufacturers do that. But yeah, so there's a few interesting sort of modern, fresh out of the factory, and I think it's interesting to see. I saw a couple of them on their stands when I was at some European shows, and not my thing to dive on right away. I'd probably rather have a real E-Type than a fake D-Type. Typically, that's how I think of things. But there's Lynx and others building incredible race cars right now and fast road cars.
Here's what I think is an interesting way of thinking about it. Is there a new Aston Martin you would rather have today over a repop factory DB5?
Oh, well, I'm a weirdo, so that's I have no interest in.
No, you're not weird at all. Have you seen any new Aston Martins?
There's one I saw that's like a highlighter color, right? That's like a crazy.
It looks like the 240Z or the new 400Z concept, right?
That car, yeah, definitely. So anyway, I like old stuff. That's just sort of my lot in life. So naturally, I would rather go.
People are chasing experiences now more than ever, and I think people's eyes are starting to glaze over with each and next horsepower figure and 0 to 60 time. Like that's basically at its peak. So manufacturers rolling out more and more experience cars like this, like if Ford, you can go buy a new K-Code crate motor. What if they were doing repop panels and you could actually buy a GT350 new factory from the Ford showroom?
Yeah, it's not from Ford, but I mean, you can buy a full-on unibody for a 67, 68 fastback, right? And just start from scratch. A lot of restaurant guys are building starting from there. So anyway, that's a whole huge world of possibility, frankly, and if people are building cars like that or people are stoked on cars like that, anything, I was at BMW for a long time, and anything the manufacturer would do that would point in the direction of heritage type stuff, I was like, high five, do something. Don't just sell, race to the bottom sedan, like same thing everybody has, and they're all, sort of competing in the same circles. Do something interesting. Take some risks. Do some cool stuff. So if they do that, it's probably not for me, but I sure wouldn't mind looking at one. And they probably fool me, right? I probably have been somewhere and looked and thought a car was real that was some sort of newer repop, and I got fooled like everybody else. So they make some pretty close tributes to what the old cars were.
You had mentioned E-Type lightweights, one of my favorite cars from the 60s. And most lightweights, semi-lightweights, talk about a controversial term, that are out there maybe aren't the real thing, but man, that's like the ultimate spec for me for an E-Type. But and I understand people are sensitive about the originality topic, but for all these manufacturers that are embracing their heritage department, specifically Porsche, Mercedes, Aston are three that come to mind that are probably doing it in the most intentional way. Wouldn't you rather have reproduction parts for insert car here produced by the factory rather than somewhere else? And I think at the end of the day, that's very positive, and that adds a layer of authenticity to non-original but original type parts. So I'm a big proponent of that, and I think the whole heritage movement, if you want to call it that, is only going to get bigger and bigger. And I think that is also a very very good thing for the hobby.
Yeah, that's a good one. I love how you rattle those off. We got to get Mike Coons on here, who's the Classic Center, Mercedes Classic Center down in SoCal, and he's kind of in charge of that. facility and that program. And I love it when manufacturers support vintage cars with parts and now events and all sorts of different things. And the fact that there are kind of enthusiasts within the ranks of the manufacturers is good for all of us, frankly, and is something that it always blew my mind when I was working on that Fintail Mercedes, which is another event veteran, dirt road veteran. That you could go either to the dealer or the classic website and start like getting the pieces you need to keep that thing on the road, even though it was made in 1967. That is cool. And Porsche is expanding their classic departments and facilities and things you can do with the cars. So we are huge fans of that at BAT. Obviously, hopefully that comes through here. Pretty much all of these types of experiments and investments in heritage and replicas and tributes and all this sort of stuff, as long as they are represented as such, right? The trick is, if you ever get into this stuff where things are claimed real and they are not real, that's when you start to be like, shake your finger a little bit, rightfully so. You gotta be honest about how things are either presented for sale or even just talked about in the broader classic sphere. But I think on the whole, most people do that, and obviously we're on the watch for that. That's a paramount factor for us in listing cars.
Yes, this is another interesting topic we cannot do justice to, but like you were saying, I mean, everyone wants a car with great history, but they also want a car with no stories, and oftentimes you can't have both. And the story is part of the history, and the level of originality can very much be impacted by amazing period race history where the car was smashed and crashed and burned to the ground and rebuilt and readied for the next race as quickly as possible using whatever parts were available to do so to make the grid. So we'll have to save that. I have a lot of opinions on that. We'll have to save that for another day.
Oh, I love it. Cool. Right at the beginning, I asked you like what cars you think of or where your mind goes immediately when we start talking about replicas and tributes and that sort of stuff. Any other thoughts on that topic or anything we didn't cover, or does that pretty much cover it?
Oh man, my mind jumps a little bit to the factory restorations that are taking place, which goes in tandem a little bit with Howard was saying, with more and more heritage parts departments. I don't know if you guys saw, Nissan is starting to roll that out with the R34, which makes me particularly excited. But I think it's like at a $250K price point. So
I don't know about that, Zach. Tell us about that.
Yeah, is that for the car, $250K out the door, or is the resto
I think it's
process?
$250 plus an R34. So hopefully you can still leave it in Japan, and maybe it'll actually be ready in 2 more years when you can collect it and bring it back over here. But I would love to see more Japanese manufacturers doing that, although they did a wonderful job of engineering their parts to last for many, many life cycles. But it's still pretty frustrating when you have a part that's a rare item that's particularly tough to find. So, I'm fully on board with that program.
R34s are going to get very interesting. There's been a lot of chatter about that. I guess they released some info about that, and those cars are starting to sneak towards the 25. And we've got
a few interesting ones in the pipeline. So
and R33s have been strong on BAT and are ramping up. But everybody, I'm not the Skyline fanboy that many folks are, and Zach can talk about those in his sleep. Howard can too. So I think those are on the verge of starting to be U.S. legal. Is that the truth?
Yeah, 2 more years they'll start to be eligible for import. Though a lot of people are, I think, buying real estate and storage spaces in Japan, huddling them up over there, and then waiting to pull the trigger in 2 years. So it's pretty crazy just to see the prices that have moved in the last 12 months just over in Japan, and the people that are storing them there, and U.S. imports getting in on those games. So interesting to see.
Sweet.
You want to go down a real rabbit hole to answer the question you just posed? What other replicas, like replicas of cars that the version was in itself kind of a kit car, amalgamation of parts, like a Myers Manx you opened with, a lot of like Manx style buggies. Like I actually like how some people build those more than a real Myers Manx. Just I think it looks cooler. Or Devons, or all this H modified stuff from the 50s, or Kellisons. That's a real deep cut on when these cars get rebuilt and resurrected from whatever the original spec was. Who's to say what's right and wrong when you really get into some of these corner cases? I don't know if I want to own a Myers Manx, but then again, I've never actually driven one, and I think if I lived on the beach, maybe maybe I'd feel differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Kellison. Little known facts. I think you know this. We talked about this in the office, but the Duke of Richmond, is that his current title? The gentleman who runs all of Goodwood and basically owns the whole ranch. He bought a Kellison off of BAT.
Nice.
Silver, red stripes, numbers on the door, and he made a video about it in his collection that he bought it off this little website in America called Bring a Trailer, and he says it with his British accent, and I saw it when I was out there, and it's a legit story and kind of knocked my socks off a little bit. That's kind of a huge name drop to drop 47 minutes into the podcast, but
That's awesome.
he had or still has that car, and he's a cool dude because he's into hot rodding and that sort of stuff, and that's a kind of hot rodders sports car from the 50s and early 60s, right? A fiberglass body that gets drop shipped to your house, and you figure out the motor, you figure out the drivetrain,
Totally.
you figure out the Halabrand wheels that are going to fit somehow. You saws all the wheel openings to fit whatever Goodyear poly glasses you're going to put on it and go.
If you couldn't afford an Allard J2, you go buy a Kellison and make moves.
Totally, right? Anyway, super interesting stuff like that. I always love seeing, and those are those replicas? Not really. I mean, they're kind of a offshoot of other similar looking sports cars that were more production built, right? But they are usually called kits or kit cars or whatever they are. And man, that we could do a better job, frankly, of like creating an own category of that on BAT, because just there are so many stories. There's been a couple, Forgotten Fiberglass is an interesting website where there's just stories about all those weird one-off hand-formed, fiberglass specials, and those could be talked about in again. We keep saying how many other conversations we could be having, but I love those cars. Some of them look pretty crazy, but the aero factor of the Kellisons meant they showed up at Salt Flats and some other cool places. So lots of interesting stuff to talk about on those. I'm glad you brought them up.
Hey man, in the 50s, people on the big Ferraris, they were chopping them up and putting in small block Chevy engines and rear ends and running them around Riverside, and that's a pod for another day.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, anyway, great stuff. Excited to get out to a couple of events. Howard, glad you survived in one piece and are back from the Mille. It's going to be an interesting summer, everybody. So reach out to us with cool events that are inspiring for you. And I still want to do the podcast from like on location somewhere. I'd love for us to be getting out of our cars, wiped out after the day, in one piece, and talking about the random miles we just put on and what the roads and what the cars were like. I think that would be a fun way to.
I want some in-car with the TI at $6,000 and you whipping back on my road.
Oh man, the rattly doors on the TI. You need like 4 arms to keep everything in one piece. I don't know if I'd have an arm available for the microphone and the sound levels on the podcast, or if you could hear it over the screeching of the Redesteins on that car. But we could try it. We are up for all sorts of creativity. So anyway, thanks for joining us. Fun conversation with you guys, as always. And hit us up at podcast@bringatrailer.com if you have any other suggestions, and shoot us a note or leave a comment right on the podcast announcements, and we will have some more fun topics to talk about. Thanks. Talk to you later.